Yeah, that works.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the meeting. And as mentioned in the invitation, today we are here for the workshop uh, with Shiven Nath. Shiven, who is a good friend and a colleague at the Mahatma Gandhi Center for Peace Studies earlier, is currently a master's student at Tel Aviv University and is also an Irwin Cotler fellow. And he'll speak about the fellowship maybe towards the end, and that will help other students and prospective LLM applicants, LLM or like master's candidates who want to go to Israel, get a good sense of what Israel offers. But coming to the presentation today, it's going to be a mix of an interaction, a workshop, and you're of course welcome to put your questions, but we'll try and take them towards the end, maybe towards the last 10 or 15 minutes, given the time remaining. But it's mostly going to be a sort of training activity where Shivan will try and address the issue at hand, which is Holocaust and modern day Israel, where he'll discuss various issues pertaining to Israel, the current geopolitical scenario, the human rights in Israel, and so on and so forth. So I invite Shivan without any further ado to start with the workshop.
Thank you very much, Rahul, for the kind introduction. Well, yes, the Holocaust, a very sensitive, a very highly sensitive topic and a very emotional topic to talk about. So I'm going to start off by saying that 6 million Jews perished in the Holocaust. It was all a part of the catastrophic and distraught final solution, which was solely orchestrated by the Nazis under Adolf Hitler. I know we have a certain amount of a rudimentary understanding of what happened in World War II. So I will be moving a little forward from that. The Holocaust, which was between the time period between 1933 and 1945, was the systematic state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million European Jews by the Nazi German regime and its allies and collaborators. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum defines the years of the Holocaust as 1933 to 1945. The Holocaust era began in January 1933 when Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power in Germany. It ended in May 1945 when the Allied Party came to power. It ended in May 1945 when the Allied powers defeated Nazi Germany in World War II. And the Holocaust is also sometimes referred to as the Shoah, or the Hebrew word for catastrophe. It is indeed catastrophic that such an act was committed under, it's a violation under international law. It's a genocide, if we were to term it. Why were the Jews killed? Because they were simply Jews, and because of Adolf Hitler's loathsome race theory, where he mentioned that the Jews are the enemy of the state, and he wrote it in his book Mein Kampf as well. So anti-Semitism was at the foundation of the Holocaust. Anti-Semitism is the hatred or prejudice against Jews. It was the basic tenet of Nazi ideology. This prejudice was also widespread throughout Europe. It was not only constrained to Germany, but it was all over Europe. So in Israel, and looking towards Israel, the Holocaust arouses a strong sense of emotions. And for me, I would say that it's not just in Jews, but also pervades the mind of every individual who's actually studied and read the Holocaust. I'm going to start this lecture with a personal underpinning. I've had the honor and privilege of meeting two Holocaust survivors, and my interaction with them has left me speechless regarding the horrific atrocities committed by Nazi Germany. And it's just a very interesting incident, which I would like to talk about before I commence this lecture. During one of the talks, there was food towards the end of the event. And the host of the event was was going to throw the food out. And this Holocaust survivor, the who was giving the talk, she said that, why would you throw this food out? And it was just that moment when she said that, why would you throw the food out, made me resonate so much with the Holocaust and made me feel that what she must have been through during that time as a young 23-year-old or a 22-year-old. It's unimaginable, and we can't even imagine what she might have gone through and what other survivors might have gone through. It's a personal trauma seeing your own brethren being murdered just because you're Jewish. So looking from the perspective of international law, these are crimes against humanity and can be termed as genocide or mass atrocities committed by a nation, and it is a violation. The Holocaust history talks about torture of the most grotesque forms, unimaginable, like I said. I shall enrich you and help you understand how the collective memory of the Holocaust has shaped Israeli society and how a proud Jewish nation stands today. So the Holocaust is extremely sensitive in the Israeli consciousness. The uniqueness of the Holocaust has left us with a legacy in the form of a collective response to the trauma of atrocity. The Shoah has called into question the nature of humanity and civilization in a way fundamentally different from any other historical event. As Geoffrey H. Hartman has suggested, we, the non-participants, share with the survivors a type of trauma or breach in our traditional conception of human and civilized nature. This emotional burden, the capacity to act as a witness to the Holocaust, is something with which we are complicit. Mark Silverstein has described the notion of acting as a witness for the dead, the deported, the disappeared, the disenfranchised, as a challenge to live beyond ourselves. The only viable response to the ravages of our post-traumatic history, it's something like that, you know. Nobel Prize-winning British playwright Harold Pinter's Ashes to the Ashes best demonstrates how the Holocaust has been seared into our consciousness and as a collective memory. I remember I watched this, one of the recordings of this play on YouTube, and right outside we had Nazi sympathizers, and you know there were many Jews who attended this event, and their kippas were pulled off, and it's hurtful, and it's very distraught to see that such acts and such people still exist today, and they would still perpetrate crimes like pulling off the kippah, a religious symbol which Jewish people wear. So thus it is important for schools all over the globe to educate students about the Holocaust and an accurate education of the Holocaust, and provide an accurate education of the Holocaust and a deeper understanding and evaluation of the same. It is imperative for students who step out into the world to know about the greatest atrocities in history. Moreover, in countries, especially in countries like the United States of America, where we see it as a country of great democratic value and freedom of speech, providing an accurate history or teaching students about what the Holocaust was all about and in greater detail, it can help in curbing anti-Semitism. As still, under free speech, Nazi flags are allowed to be portrayed in the US. This ideology is spreading hate and can be deemed to be dangerous, as it is openly orchestrating hate and orchestrating the killing of Jewish people. It should be legally banned, as it is leading neo-Nazis to openly perpetrate hate against the Jewish people. Furthermore, anti-Semitism is not only limited to, neo-Nazis portraying their flags or going on protests in the US. It's movies such as The Inglourious Basterds in, in Hollywood disrespecting Holocaust survivors by providing an alternative history. And I would like to posit another argument that, most of the Germans were bystanders in the Holocaust, as they did not actively do anything to prevent such a dastardly act. And even the fact that Jews were denied entry to England and different parts of the world it's making it even more important for a Jewish state to exist today. The notion of never again and never forget should be carried on and should be embedded in the minds of every individual. So I'm assuming that many of you might be law students, so I will look at the trial of Adolf Eichmann, who, along with others, was solely responsible for such a vile act against the Jewish people. So Adolf Eichmann was he orchestrated the final solution at Adolf Hitler's behest. He fled to Argentina post the World War, and there was a Nazi movement brimming there in Argentina at that time, and he ultimately was brought to justice, and he was brought to Israel, and he was given the death penalty. And that, interestingly enough, that was the only time in the Israeli legal system that a death penalty was given by a court. So it was the Mossad in an operation who managed to trace Adolf and bring him to justice in Israel. He was kidnapped. He was brought in on an El Al flight to Israel, and then he was tried. He was given a fair trial. I want to look at this event as, a strength for a newly born Jewish nation, and as a part of the memory which pervades the mind of every Jewish person. This feat foreshadowed the prowess of a young nation. It showed that a strong Jewish nation is going to exist. It was imperative for an individual like Eichmann to be brought to justice. For that matter, it can be avowed that the Nuremberg trials should have also taken place in Israel. I feel that reparations are not enough for such a gruesome crime. The German public needs to be and should be educated and taught the true reality and history of the Holocaust, as there is rampant anti-Semitism today in Germany, in various parts of Europe as well. So, thinking theoretically, a better way to understand the nuances and how modern day Israel is and it's why it's being like this in the international political arena, one can look at the constructivist school in international relations. Constructivism views the world as being socially constructed, thereby emphasizing the role that ideas, norms, and values play in shaping the behavior of states in international relations, thereby asserting that agency and structures are mutually constituted. Constructivists avow that states can have multiple identities which are socially constructed through interaction with others. Hence, they claim that the international political arena is shaped by shared ideas, norms, and values that guide the behavior of states. The collective memory of the trauma and the conflict which Israel faces, the vexatious conflict which Israel faces with its Arab neighbors today, has largely shaped Israeli society and the conflict at large, and it is guiding Israeli foreign policy and the politics at large in the state. Today, a siren is sounded in Israel in memory of those who perished in the Holocaust. And a proud Jewish nation stands tall in this conflict-prone zone. And these very hostile Arab neighbors are trying to destroy the only democratic state in such a hostile environment. Moreover, this also justifies the US's support towards Israel, because Israel, Israel is one of the only democratic nations in the Middle East. There are many arguments centered around Israel being an apartheid state. Israel is not an apartheid state, and it is not violating international law in any way. It's not occupying Palestine, as many people claim. The existence of the state of the Jews the state of the Jews has existed for centuries. And moreover, under international law, it was a transfer from a previous sovereign, which was the British Empire. Thus, legally speaking, Israel's existence is justified. Moreover, Israel is not an apartheid state, and a settler colonial state, which many people say. Israel has a substantial Arab population which lives within the state. Many Arabs are doing various jobs in Israel, and they're studying at educational institutions in Israel as well. Israel has taken measures to protect its Arab population too. Let me remind you that the Iron Dome, which is protecting the state of Israel, is defensive technology, not offensive technology. And it's not advocating colonialism or racism, as Arabs are allowed to work and have rights in the state of Israel.
Shiven, hear me?
Yeah.
I just interject with a question. So I wanted to bring you back to the international law implications regarding Israel's current approach. Why do you think there's still a lack of recognition from some countries, or even if it's recognized by most countries, why do you think there's a lack of diplomatic relations being established?
See, diplomatic relations with Israel will only improve in the next coming years. You see the Abraham Accords in 2020, which were signed under Trump. I know Trump has been criticized for many of his foreign policy decisions and his domestic political measures, but you see that Israel is a state which has always existed, and Arab nations have always, they would chose not to establish diplomatic relations with Israel, because historically speaking, the state of Palestine, I'm going to say something which is a little controversial, but the state of Palestine never existed, because the Palestinian Arabs were mostly disunited in their cause. They had the Jordanians fighting for them. They had the Egyptians fighting for them. They were never unified in a political cause. And why Arab nations have refrained from establishing diplomatic relations with the state of Israel is simply because it pushed out the Palestinian Arabs. They feel a sense of, camaraderie with the Palestinian Arabs. But you see that this narrative is changing and has changed greatly today, because the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Islamic countries such as these have established diplomatic relations with the state of Israel. And I won't be surprised that there's going to be a peace deal soon between Saudi, Israel, and Qatar, but that's a very realist scenario to look at, because it's that business and economics and trade has always existed between Israel and the UAE and many such Arab nations. The hesitation is there, but a lot of operations and a lot of trade is shared between Arab nations today. Rahul?
Yes,
Would you like to interject, or would you like to
No,
See,
no.
and also the fact that Israel is fulfilling its rights, as even if you look at it, even in terms of even if you say, sorry.
Yes, just a second. I think there was an issue with my video, but my question was about Palestine as a state, and that obviously has a very important uh, argument which comes from the other side, that Palestine existed as a civilization for like 2000 years, and there have been like books written on this. So how do we counter that, especially in the context of India, which, for example, in under the current regime is pushing for the idea that India has always existed as a civilizational state, and it's only become a nation state now. So how do we counter the Palestinian civilizational state argument?
See, yes, Islam can be always studied as a civilization, but that's what many people make a mistake. We perceive Islam as a religion. It's actually Islam as a civilization. So, and if you remember that Muhammad, when he got the message from the Prophet, he actually, people were not really Muslims. I'm going to say that, put it that way. Most of the individuals were converted, and Mecca was a city of idol worshippers. And yes, there is always an argument that it was the state of Palestine, but I would like to say that the legal argument is that the British had the land and they transferred it as a sovereign to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people fought for their land, and very rightfully this land exists. And the state of Israel is fulfilling most of its obligations as well, as it's as per the Montevideo Principles in international law. It's you would know better. You would be able to understand this better than me. But Israel is fulfilling its obligations as a state as well. It provides this. Not many people know, but the state of Israel provides Gaza with water, with different medical help in certain circumstances as well. So Israel's right to exist has been questioned, but it should not be questioned, because the Jews were exiled from their homeland. In the Torah, it's mentioned, and they have a right of return in this homeland.
So, does this mean that you are not in support of the two-state theory, or what is your position on the current state recognition of Palestine?
See, a two-state solution would not work for the simple reason that I would say that integrating the Palestinian Arabs into Israeli society would be a better option rather than having a two-state solution to this conflict.
You also say this because Palestine itself is not currently united. There's a Hamas group, then there's a political.
Exactly. I was going to come to that argument that because the political scenario which is in Gaza, Hamas, what is it? It's a terrorist organization. What is it doing? Firing rockets at innocent Israeli civilians. And not only that, it's the Fatah and various groups like the PLO, they disunited. And mostly the funding which is going into Hamas, and the US is funding also in many states, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. Where is this money going? They're not educating the children in their population. Children are being taught that the Jewish people are enemies. And they're using that money to fire rockets at Israel. And Israel is widely criticized for its actions. Why? Today, we look at the recent conflict in Gaza where Israel conducted surgical strikes in Gaza. Israel conducts surgical strikes if Hamas, okay, look at this, we look at it from a legal perspective. If Hamas is in a building, in a hospital building, sheltering and conducting its operations from there. And Israel goes and bombs Hamas or bombs a hospital. Is it a violation under international law? No, it's not a violation under international law. Simply because it's using it as a military target. And Israel and Gaza is hiding under these individuals, hiding under schools, and then Israel is criticized for its actions that, in Gaza, so many people were killed. But no one's seeing this side. And Israel conducts its strikes in such a manner that there are minimum casualties. It's only targeting military. It's not targeting civilian targets.
Okay. So now, since a large part or large aim of this meeting is to ensure that students are trained with certain knowledge regarding Israel, the implications. So my question is, how do we ensure that the international reportage that comes from Israel and Palestine alike is accurate, and there's a lack of misinformation and disinformation? Because one could argue that it's the Israelis' narrative that is being put forth that is more dominant, for the simple reason that it gets the maximum coverage. And like you say, Hamas is a terrorist organization, and therefore probably cannot get that support or coverage. So how do we ensure there's a balance in coverage? And this in turn will help students to learn more about the situation there. Yes, you're audible, I think. Oh, you'll have to unmute, Shivan.
Yeah, sorry, I got muted for some reason. Oh, but correct representation and accurate representation. That's an interesting question. So how can we actually represent what the true not just following, the BBC, what it has to say. Let's look at the BBC, what they say. The British Broadcasting Corporation. It's filled with propaganda, always criticizing Israel for its actions. Following that, you have to actually look at Israeli media, because the Israeli left, like Haaretz, is also publishing articles on the same. You can look at Israeli media, and let me reiterate that Israel not an apartheid state. It's a democratic state in a hostile environment. It has successfully established a democratic state. It was formed in 1948. We're in 2023. You see the development and the way the state has evolved. But ensuring correct, reports for, what's happened, or if there's any conflict, I think it's better to follow Israeli news media sources, and you can also follow certain, Palestinian, like they're very biased, like Al Jazeera, very biased. They won't give you a very balanced perspective of what's going on over here, or what's going on in Israel, right? When like the recent conflict you see the wording, you have to pay attention, very close attention to the wording, the way Al Jazeera words its articles or terms its articles, and the BBC. It always says Israel is doing this. Israel has committed an act of aggression. But what is exactly inciting this act of aggression? What is the root cause of it? See, Israel will exist, and it has the right to exist. And it's terrorism which is actually perpetrating and which is calling for such actions. Correct reportage can be done through, looking at Israeli news sources, and, people who want to understand the Israeli side can look at I-20, ITV, Israel TV, and even Haaretz and various other sources. Haaretz is the Israeli left, if you want to see the Israeli left's perspective. And the Times of Israel is fantastic too, to see, to understand the nuances and the deeper nuances of the conflict.
So moving on to the next segment, of our discussion, which is the current political setup in Israel. Of
Yeah.
course, correct me if I'm wrong, but Israel follows a proportional representation system and not the traditional first past the poll system, which means that it's difficult for them to have sort of stability in the government. Is it a good thing given that
I'm sorry, I lost you in the middle.
democratic yeah, my question to you is, and this is about the next segment of the discussion, the current political setup in Israel. Current political setup in Israel, which involves a lot of instability. Why do you think there is this instability? And do you think this is a good thing, which shows the accurate democratic spirit, or
In
it's
my opinion, of the protests, India can learn from the protests in Israel because it's giving the Israeli public to actually openly advocate what they actually truly feel about. It's giving them an opportunity to actually, propagate for the democratic ideals of the state of Israel, which on the pillars, the democratic pillars on which the state of Israel was established. And what Bibi or Benjamin Netanyahu is doing, it's a harming. I was going to come to that in my conclusion, but it's good that you asked me this. It's so what Bibi is doing is severely harming and weakening the democratic principles in Israeli. It's harming and weakening Israeli democracy, and these protests have given a very reason, and it's given an what's a healthy democracy? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. This is freedom of expression. You're allowing the public to openly propagate for what they feel about, and they're not being arrested for it. Look at the last protests in India. Remember when we had the Citizenship Amendment Act? What is it? So many arrests, arbitrary arrests on no grounds. And even in the US, you have people like, some people are arrested without any, arbitrary arrests, I would say. Over the people have not been arrested for openly propagating to feel what they truly feel about. And I think that's the sign of a healthy democracy. That's actually truly a very healthy sign of a democracy. That's how a democratic state should work and how it should function. Bibi intervening with the judicial reforms and his push for judicial reforms, it's harming the democratic principles of the country. But yet, public intellectuals and journalists are allowed to express and openly express their discontent over what he's doing. Look at India. How many individuals the leader of opposition in India was thrown out of parliament, Rahul Gandhi. Is that harming the democratic? Of course, it's harming the democratic principles of. So I would say that India should be viewed as Israel's sister democracy. Because both India and Israel went through roughly congruent paths in history. 1947, India got its independence. 1948, the state of the Jews was born. So comparing both the narratives, we see what is actually a democracy and what is not a democracy. India in the constitution says, yes, we are a sovereign socialist democracy. But what is actually a democracy and what actually draws the line and what actually crosses the line is a very difficult question to answer. But in my opinion, if you allow people to express their discontent against the government without being arrested, is a democracy.
Okay, so moving on, like, can you also, and maybe with some questions to follow up, the possible opportunities for higher education in Israel, maybe master's, PhD, what are the opportunities?
Israel is very good. Israel is a Tel Aviv University is it's a good opportunity for Indian students to explore because there are various scholarship opportunities which are offered by Tel Aviv University, and not just Tel Aviv University, like Hebrew University in Jerusalem and Bar Ilan, and even universities like IDC Erchilia, Reichman University. They're offering courses on international relations, and especially the law school at Tel Aviv University, the Bookman Faculty of Law, offers an LLM program with which students can learn about can explore electives and seminars through and learn international law from the Israeli Middle Eastern perspective, let me put it that way. And so there are very exciting and opportunities available for Indian students. I remember that when I was with the Israeli embassy in New Delhi, there are various scholarship opportunities that Tel Aviv University offers to law students. And also, I think the JGLS has a direct partnership with the law school at Tel Aviv University, and Tel Aviv University in general has a partnership with Jindal Jindal Global University. So yes, and also this fellowship program, which I have been a part of, has amply aided me in the process of combating anti-Semitism and being very vocal about it and being an ambassador, I would say, for the for the center, the Irwin Cotler Center for Democracy, Human Rights, and Justice. Being an advocate for the state of the Jewish people, for the state of Israel, and re-educating and telling people and teaching people about what the state of Israel is actually about. Because what we read in the news, in the media is very often misconstrued. Like I'll give an example, like, even the Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, one of his speeches in Himachal, he mentioned that, oh, Israel has done this, and India had conducted surgical strikes in Pakistan at that time. Oh, Israel has done this, and earlier people used to talk that Israel has done this, and now India's feats are being discussed. But Israel is not a state. It's not a warmongering state that many people perceive it as. Yes, it is a state with military and economic might, and it can be very easily said that it's a superpower in the Middle East. It's an economic and military powerhouse. But it's not just that. It's a country which has deep-rooted sense of cultural values and religious values. So yes, coming back to educational opportunities for students, opportunities for students. They should apply to, if they're wanting to pursue the LLM, they should apply for the LLM program at Tel Aviv University. And if they want, they can come in contact with me and I can recommend them for the Irwin Cotler Fellowship for the following,
That would be very helpful for the students. So I think given the time, I will now open the floor for questions. And if anybody has question, you can just unmute and like ask directly. I can see Palak's hand.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Palak Jain. Thank you for the presentation. my question was, there is little awareness about hatred against Jews in India. Is it because India itself has not discriminated them?
That's a very good question. India is one of the very few countries where the Jewish people actually face persecution. Very, very few countries that have actually faced persecution. The Jewish people were welcomed in India centuries back, and Israel till today. I go out on the streets of Tel Aviv. I say I'm from India. They say, "Oh, from India." They greatly admire the state of the Indian people because the Jews were never persecuted in India. They were allowed to freely practice their religion. And in 1948, not many people know this, but David Ben Gurion, who was the founding father of Israel, and Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had a very, I would say, like, it was Ben Gurion's one-sided love affair with Nehru, as Dr. Kinvira Jangid, one of my mentors, puts it. But I very much agree with this because in 1948, Ben Gurion wrote to Nehru for recognizing the state of Israel, but India has always advocated restraint because of the imprudent Nehruvian ideology of the non-aligned movement. But every Israeli prime minister has greatly admired the state of Israel. And in 1962, not many people know this, Nehru wrote to Ben Gurion asking for arms against the Chinese when we were fighting the Sino-Soviet war, Sino-Indian war in 1962. And Israel helped India with arms and ammunition. Then in 1971, again, when we fought the war with Pakistan, Israel supplied us with arms. Indira Gandhi wrote to Golda Meir, and Golda Meir readily agreed to supply arms to India. 1999, during the Kargil War, again, Israel supplied arms. Israel has always been a reliable strategic partner and has greatly admired India.
So you bring up India and its relationship with Israel. Certainly, we have boosted our security partnership, defense procurement, but how do you see the future with respect to India? Because India has also been very steadfast in its demand for recognition of Palestine. It has not let go of that demand yet.
See, India openly advocates for a two-state solution.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say one thing that, India and Israel are cooperating in various areas in defense. And there are numerous joint military exercises and even joint military exercises which are being conducted, which are taking place even today as we are speaking between India and Israel. Not only that, Israel is providing India with satellite imaging and technological cooperation, intelligence cooperation. But this is sending a very subtle message to not only Palestinians, but also Iran, which is a threat not only to the state of Israel, but to the whole of the Middle East. It's sending a very subtle message to, because it's saying that, yes, we are going to openly cooperate with the state of Israel and we recognize its existence. But I think that India and Israel, I'm going to speak from a very realist lens, from the realist school of international relations. I'm going to say that India and Israel relations are only going to move toward, it's only going to be moving towards an upward trajectory because recently, it's as of last year, a year and a half back, the Indian consular general in Ramallah in Palestine was found dead. The cause of death is unknown, and there are talks which have been going around that the Indian consular general in Ramallah is empty. So it speaks a lot that there is something which is India. There's been a significant shift in India's foreign policy post Narendra Modi's government because before Narendra Modi coming to power, India-Israel relations, like what Palak mentioned, India-Israel relations were in the closet. Now they're out of the closet. India and Israel were always good friends. Israel greatly admired and greatly respected respected India, but it's now out of the closet. But I'm foreseeing, and I'm going to be predicting a much greater cooperation in the near future between India and Israel. Okay. Not only defense, culture, because today, culturally speaking, there are about 80 to 90,000 Jews of Indian origin who live in the state of Israel. Not only that, it's even the fact that countless Israelis visit India post their military service. Countless Israelis to learn yoga, to learn this, to engage with the spirituality of India. So it's fascinating, and it's again, like I said, coming back to my point, it's diplomatically sending a very, very strong message to Iran, which is a hostile country.
So I think Manan has a question.
Yes. Please.
Hi, Shiven. A really great presentation. And since we are just now talking about joint military exercises and how India and Israel should come forward together. So, what do you think are the immediate security issues that Israel must take cognizance of?
Oh, interesting question. See, obviously, the immediate security concerns for Israel is Iran. Israel has always been in a fear of being annihilated at the hands of its hostile neighbors like Syria, and even the immediate security concerns, I would say, for Israel is right now Iran, and not only Iran, but even Hamas as a regional actor, because it's openly perpetrating acts of terror against the Jewish people. But nevertheless, it's we need to look at the Israeli state as a military superpower in the Middle East, and also the fact that I'm going to use an Indian angle to this, because I've been deliberating upon this, because if you see that China has brokered a peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So this will lead to India and Israel collaborating more, and it will even lead to India and Israel collaborating in their strategic interests. But the immediate security concern for Israel is missiles being fired from Gaza and Iran's nuclear program. Because you cannot trust the Ayatollahs. You cannot trust the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The US has said so. It's a serious threat to the state of Israel. It's not only a threat to the state of Israel, but the whole of the Middle East. So the most immediate and the imperative security concern for Israel currently is Iran, the threat of Iran.
I think we have another set of questions, and given the time, we can just take them up. So someone has a question.
So, can you explain the origin and ethnicities in Israel?
I think the question was, can you explain the origin and ethnicities among the Jews?
Okay, so there are different various ethnic groups in Israel, like the Ashkenazi, the Mizrahi, and the Indian Jewish groups are known as the Bene Israel community. And the Bene Israel community mostly comprised of Jewish people from Maharashtra, Kolkata, and the Kohen Jews, which are a different sect. And also, there's a sect of the Jewish people which are in the northeast in part of India. They're known as the Bene Misham community. But there's a debate which is going on whether they're actually the last sect or not in Jewish. It's widely in Judaism, because it's been widely contested. And there are, of course, there's the Ethiopian Jewry, there's the Soviet Jewry, there's the European Jewry. So yeah, there are different various ethnic groups in Israel, and and what's fascinating is that all Jewish people came from different parts of the world, and they came to Israel, and they spoke one language, and the language is the language which was revived. It's amazing, it's fascinating how this language came up, and every Jewish person is speaking one language, which is Hebrew.
So when you say that Israelis came from around the world, you mean that, or you are breaking the myth that they have only come from European descent. Is that correct?
No, I'm not saying that. Like, I'm not stating that in any way. I'm saying that Israel is it's a multicultural nation. Like, there are Jewish people coming from Iraq, from Baghdad, from India, from various parts of the world. It's not only European Jewry which makes the state of Israel. It's a very beautiful state, an inclusive state, which is the home of the Jewish people.
So
What is uniting the state of Israel is it's the Jewish people, which binds the state of Israel.
So maybe we have time for one final question, and I can see that in the chat already. Vishal,
Vishal, okay. My question is, who are the major
it's
partners
about
of Israel in the western part? So, of course, like, the US has always been the US is, if you look at US foreign policy interests, the US has always been, the US was never warm towards Israel, if that's what you mean, because I did not entirely understand your question, but the US has not exactly been warm towards the state of Israel. It, of course, shares the idea of shared democratic values and democratic principles between the two nations. But the US has always has not only viewed Israel in terms of curbing Soviet influence and curbing Iranian influence, but it's also the notion of shared democratic values, the freedom angle as well. But the US's prime concerns in the region are securing its energy interests. Therefore, it's always been walking on a diplomatic tightrope between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and the US is trying to also broker peace deal between most of the Arab nations, and playing a role as a peacemaker in the region to broker peace deals between Israel and the various Arab nations. And this is a great potential possibility, strategic possibility, even for India to play a decisive role to show and counter China in this regard. Because if you look at the recent peace deal between China, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, it will make India also step up its diplomatic game. It should make India step up its diplomatic game. You look at the Abraham Accords in 2020, it's a historic and a monumental move. Israel, UAE, and also I2U2, you look at I2U2, Israel, UAE, and Israel, UAE, and the USA. What is this? It's securing energy interests. It's also, they say it's not military, but of course it's military. So there are various potential possibilities and various potential alliances that can be established with Israel, because at the end of the day, it's the Jewish state is going to always exist, and it will never cease to exist. Thank you.
Just, I think, finished on time. Thank you so much, Shiven, for the discussion. I know that you're busy with maybe your final segment of the program, and I also want to thank the participants. Like, we had like over 25 participants throughout the discussion, and for the wonderful questions. I'm sure this will serve as a very good starting point for those who want to have a deeper understanding of Israel. And I'm glad that you could make the time.
No, thank you very much, Rahul.
Thank you very
It was the honor was all mine to and thank you very much for having me over and letting me give this
Yes, and I also want to, of course, thank the institute that made it possible.
Yes.
The
Yes.
Institute for Democracy, Human Rights and Justice, and the fellowship that you were conferred on. I think not only will it help other Indian students to pursue the fellowship, but it also made them understood the responsibility that the fellowship entails, which is to disseminate ideas of peace, human rights, and justice. So
Yes, absolutely.
the institute as well.
We must promote the vision of Justice, Honorable Justice Irwin Cotler. He was the former Justice Minister of Canada, and he openly advocated the case for Jamal Khashoggi. If you remember Jamal Khashoggi, I would just like to close with this remark that he openly advocated the case for Jamal Khashoggi when he was killed by the Saudi Arabian government, by the theocratic state of Saudi Arabia. He openly advocated for that case. And we need to promote this vision of human rights, justice, and democracy throughout the world. And we need to spread this message spread this message.
Yes.
That's how I'd like to end with. And thank you very much. Shalom, namaste.
For others, the recording will be available because we had quite a few people who could not join because of the timings. Many people in the US wanted to join, but because of the time zone difference, they could not. So we'll, of course, have the recording uploaded and sent across. Thank you so much, Shiven, again.
Bye.